Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and honor to be invited to such an important event. And so my sincere congratulations to the Jubilee, the 75th anniversary of cultural institution of such an importance. You know, from the point of a Russian citizen who could witness or at least knew about this total devastation of many institutions during the last century, it's like a miracle to understand that it was created 75 years ago in spite of all the havocs and continue to exist. So my congratulations and development in future. You know that Russia is a culture of talk, so to enlighten the audience in 10 minutes, it's a real challenge. Well, I'll do my best. I probably speak a little bit about the role of culture and controversy which exists between the understanding the role of culture and its public appreciation from the point of view probably of Russian experience. You know, 6 years ago, the Russian Minister of Culture pompously declared that 2010 will be the year of cultural exchange between France and Russia. So it will be a year of France and Russia. It meant that it will be quite a lot of really cultural exchanges. And the major event that was planned, it was huge, I would say, festival of Russian culture in Paris. When I heard it, I really felt a huge dread, because I imagined immediately how it would look like, and I was right. So in the end, the whole Paris was full of pseudo-folklore dancers. It were 3-meter-high matryoshkas before Palais Royal. It was awful kitsch of all this totalitarian and pre-revolutionary, exotic and pseudo-oriental realities, which usually are associated with Russia. And really, if people say Russia, it's immediately a strange mixture of these balalaikas, caviar, fur, and a little bit of a gulag. So this is kind of international image of Russia, which is very difficult to deal with if you are in a cultural field or you really try to present your culture in a different way, your country in a different way. So when I heard this announcement, my first idea was that we ought to have an alternative festival which will show another face of Russia, just a different image of the country. So my foundation, Michael Prokhorova Foundation, decided to be organizer and the main sponsor of a festival of contemporary art in Lyon. This is the second very culturally rich city in Paris. But before I describe what we tried to do, I want to say a few words about really cultural issues. You know, it's a sad paradox that on the one hand, we speak so many times at the different occasions on the importance of culture in contemporary world. On the other hand, just look how all news are organized in all kinds of media. So culture, together with sport and weather forecast, at the very bottom of this news hierarchy. It means, in a way, that we still look at culture as something subsidiary, you know, something, you know, not necessary, but, you know, it's politics, economy, all kind of issues are at the very top of this hierarchy. On the one hand, there are quite a lot of talks, and they're quite right, that culture nowadays is a successful rival of traditional industries and cultural industries, like you know, all kinds of creative hubs, like cultural tourism in a way. It's really a new economy, and there's quite a lot of reports, and it's, you know, it's common knowledge in a way. On the other hand, if you look at the state budgets, so the first victim to cuttings is always education and culture in a way. So we can see a very strange picture, the gap between the new reality and perception of this reality. So in this, in the public opinion, and public opinion, you know, embraces all social stratas of society, culture is still either it's a luxury of rich people, or it's a kind of aristocratic resort, or just, you know, embellishment on the social edifice in a way. But we're well known, and I would follow the remarks of previous speakers, that culture in the modern world, at least for the last 300 years in Europe, and I consider that Russia is part of Europe, whether you like it or not, I'm sorry. So it's created the pool of ideas and social metaphors which nourished all other spheres of activity and which nourished really the society. You know, from this pool of common ideas, we still create our national and, I would say, individual identity. So the problem is what kind of ideas, what this pool of ideas looks like now. You know, when we, you know, reproach our politicians that they stopped playing the cultural cards in their international relations, I think the problem is there is something wrong with this pool of ideas, whether it's needed to be extended and deepened. And I think this is the time, when we speak about the time of crisis, this is the time to radically reevaluate what we call, you know, European democratic values. It's not that these values are wrong, but we deal with new reality, new generation who didn't have any experience of previous horrible wars. So we need these new metaphors, new language, cultural language first of all, for expressing these ideas to make them attractive to people of other cultures and generations. And this is, I think, this is a huge problem. Where culture nowadays is doing and is striving to do it, it's really to reevaluate, to find this new cultural language, when then will be part of political language in general. And it's, I would say, probably more visible in Russia, because Russia is a culture of radical. It's a country of radical culture, where all tendencies and trends are just how, you know, exaggerated and presented with clarity. I would give you one example. You know, in mid-90s, our president, Boris Yeltsin, felt this void of cultural legitimizing of the new order of things. So he started speaking about that we need some new national idea. It sounded, you know, ridiculous, and so there are quite a lot of jokes of that. But what he wanted, I think, to express that he can't grasp this new reality through the lenses of cultural, at least, stereotypes or notions. And by the way, if we look at the rise of totalitarian, authoritarian sentimentality in Russia and in Europe in a way, I think at least partly it's due to this lack of new ideas. Or at least new notions expressing the same ideas. So I think we now, at this very stage, where culture in the broad sense of the word is trying again to create this new type of ideas representing democratic values, European values. You know, the real problem, the objective problem is that because we try to create this transnational communicational world, but we still live in the world of romantic sensibility within national states. So the idea and our identities, it's to present the uniqueness of our own states. So we try to present not the common pool of ideas, but something very specific, which simplifies all authoritarian thinkers to create this. This is, Russia is not Europe. I don't know, this is not this, that, or that. So how to combine this idea of new European identity with this local specificity? I think this is the major problem which we face altogether, whether we're Russians, French, German, Dutch, in a way. So in this is a world, that's how I felt when I decided to create this festival. You know, in order to fight the stereotypes, you need to present some positive things. And what is alternative identity? What we can present as a Russian identity, image of the country. You know, and we still, unfortunately, when we speak about relationships, successful cultural relationship, usually, unfortunately, in the end, we exchange stereotypes. what, say, a Russian person thinks about Denmark. Immediate two associations. Thanks to Shakespeare, it's Hamlet, I'm sorry, which has nothing to do with Denmark in a way. And the second one, of course, Vikings, with this, idiotic horned helmets and all this, and because of the games, which now they're so popular in a way. It's not enough, I would say, to understand contemporary country. But unfortunately, when you face, for instance, because I'm a publisher, when you face, for instance, a foreign colleague, and I present some new text and say, that's a wonderful writer, what's the usual reaction? It's too Russian. It's not too Russian. In a way, so the idea of this strange exotic country, Dostoevsky passions, in a way, and so, in a way, that's the criteria. So if I have some intellectual text, which I think is very important in a way, it's considered not Russian enough. Because the stereotype, Russia should be something exotic, strange, horrible, but not civilized. I'm sorry. So in a way, when we started this festival, our idea was, and by the way, this festival had the name which is called The Unknown Siberia, not only because the foundation works in Siberia regions, but I would say Siberia is a kind of metaphor of all this stereotype imagination towards Russia. But I would say what we try to present, showing either unknown classical things or really dynamic, interesting contemporary artistic life, just to show that Siberia combines, in a way, two opposite features. Of course, it's well known this is the place of prisons and gulags. It's really true. So it's the place of unfreedom. But on the other hand, it was and always was a place of freedom as well, because the Russian serfs ran to Siberia where there is no serfdom. Religious dissidents went there because there they had this religious freedom. And many other people tried to find the alternative living, so in the forests of Siberia. So this complicated vision of Russia, which has its history of freedom and search for social equality, but has never been presented abroad, even not very often presented within the country. So we wanted to show it, that the other face, that we have our own history of freedom, of search for equality, humanization of the country. And I would say it had a huge success, because the subtitle was that Russia in search of new identity. And so we presented these different ways how we try to reformulate the idea of new democratic vision and how a country could live under it. And I would say, and the result was not only revelation from the French public, who somehow never realized that we can do such a lot of interesting things in a way, but in a way it was revelation for us all, because what you know living in your own country is one thing, but if you present it abroad, you have this distance vision on your own culture. So suddenly we realized that this new and sometimes radical art and culture is continuation of the famous Russian tradition of a culture which thinks about a person, sympathize with a human being, but not with geopolitical fantasies. And this is, again, you could see that in Russia especially, when for many years, for at least 300 years, political and social life was always suppressed by authoritarian regimes. Culture became not only an escape, but became the most important platform for all social and political issues. So culture always resisted these totalitarian ambitions of the state. And in this way, I think this is also a very important experience. And probably here, we could say something very important of the role of culture in our world. So what I wanted to say, that in spite of all the differences and unpleasant political situation in Russia and we're all in the same boat. What we need really, this is the intellectual impulse, intellectual attempt to revelate really the noble ideas of democracy and social equality, and just to win, to win and attract the other generation, other cultures, proving that really democratic values are very vital, important, and the only way, I would say, decent and dignified existence. Probably I'll stop here.